The recording and the webinar slides will be made afterwards available. So
okay,
yes,
perfect. Thank you.
very well. Good. With this, let me start. Today's webinar is about the Viva, and the general learning outcome should be that you understand what to expect in the Viva, how to prepare for it, and how to act once undergoing it. And specifically, we would like to look at understand what the Viva is about, possible Viva outcomes, preparation strategies, what to expect, and perhaps as importantly, what not to expect. Look at the Viva day and some example questions by chapter that are to be expected. And then also look at something that is perhaps not that much under consideration, which means what is post-Viva happening. And then in the group activity, we will look at biggest worries that people have for preparing for the Viva or that are in the Viva scene to be. Now, what is the Viva about? It is an oral examination and typically for an academic qualification, and it's a counterpart to the thesis. Now, while the thesis asks you to present your research in written, the very same is true for the Viva, where you are just about to defend it orally. There will be no slideshows, nothing. It will be you talking and explaining what you have been doing. And usually it is conducted, at least for the UK, behind closed door, and there will be two examiners, an internal examiner from your institution and an external examiner who's an expert in the field. For interdisciplinarity, heavy work, there might be more than two examiners to be appointed, and there might be an independent chair who facilitates the oral examination, and the supervisor might or might not assist the Viva, but he will not be active in it, but just be a silent observer. Now, what's the main purpose of the Viva? First and foremost, it's to confirm that the thesis is your own work, and this is in particular important for students that are undertaking their doctorate remotely, which at current will be the case for most of the students. Second, that you understand what you have been writing and that you are able to discuss and defend your research. Defend not in the sense of this is how it is done, but explaining the reasons why you have been doing things as you did them. And it should show the awareness of the originality and the wider research field, and also that you can locate your work within such wider field and know what are the limitations and what might be future research that still could be carried out. Yeah, the possible Viva outcomes, they are not that many. And they are more common and less common one. One of the less common one is be awarded with an immediate pass the degree. This, I think I only came in all of those years one time along. Much more likely is it to be awarded the degree subject to either minor modifications or subject to major modifications. And the difference in between minor and major mainly lays in between the time. For minor modifications, it will be up to 6 months, and for major modifications, 6 months plus. And if you get a resubmission request, then likely it might be up to 2 years, because that means you will needing to do extended revision of the thesis.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, please come in.
Yeah. Okay. So my question is, if a student reaches to the point where the institution will allow the Viva to occur for this particular individual, what does that actually mean? Does it mean that the institution has kind of accepted the thesis, and it only means that the student has to just apply orally, you know, kind of an explanation of the thesis? So I'm just trying to understand at that point.
The typical, what could be perhaps expected is the thesis is up to the standard, your supervisor is fine with it and says, okay, go ahead and submit. The faculty looks through it and also saying, yes, that is to be of a good standard. And then the Viva is scheduled. Now, this is perhaps one of the standards, but there are other reasons why you might submit. And one of the reasons that I have come quite often across is time. Your time is up. You either submit or you're out of the program. Once this case comes in, the quality might not be as desired, but we will look into that at a later point in the webinar to exactly this case. So it's not that just because you have submitted your thesis, you can think the Viva is only a formality. No, it is not. Does that answer the question, Hans?
Yes, absolutely. This is exactly what I was trying to understand. Obviously, if you get to the Viva stage, obviously it doesn't necessarily mean that you will get awarded a doctorate or whatever.
No.
But yeah, I understand the point.
So that's exactly, as you see here, the award can still be a lower degree than the one submitted for. And I think this pretty much will answer your question. Official data from the OECD confirms that 52% of those that at one point in their lifetime start a doctorate will drop out. You could call it the silent death because it's very rarely that officially people are kicked out of programs. Their time might be up. This might be one of the reasons, and they are unenrolled. But the much more likely case is you just give up and drop dead, literally speaking. And this might happen prior or post Viva. What counts is that 52% are out at the end. So be aware of that because it's a very high rate. Now, what are the preparation strategies? And here we now come to the points. For the start, understand where you are. And as Hans asked, when is the thesis expected to be accepted? Now, time can come in. If you are running out of time, then it's still better to submit a thesis that might have some known flaws, but is over and above pretty good, because then, depending on the Viva outcome, you still will be given the time to do the corrections that you have not, that you haven't done before. And you then also will be much better guided because you will get an examination report where exactly stands what needs to be improved. Now, but a scary amount of people, a scary number of people exactly enters the Viva by thinking, yeah, well, the thesis was fine enough, has been accepted to be handed in. Now it's just a formality. Now, exactly this is not the case. Just because your thesis was accepted, there might be various reasons for it. So better have a clear understanding on how good is your thesis. Check for that. Now, then there's the administrative Viva preparation. Check with your institution's policies and practices. Get to know the profiles of previous publications and experiences of the appointed examiners. Formulate yourself a detailed timetable for preparation and stick to it. Take an exact printed copy of your thesis and then annotate it, highlight it, take post-its, and this can get very colorful, but it allows you to have a very good understanding of where the information are in your thesis and to quickly access them and to point the examiners to the exact page, to the exact figure, to the exact number. This is the type of level of details that will be expected. And so you should have a well annotated printed copy of your thesis at hand in front of you during the Viva.
One question, does it mean during the Viva discussion, you can actually look through your thesis?
Yes.
And for example, if they ask you a question that on page 59 or whatever, that this has been written, you can actually go to that page and say, okay, it's, or do you have to memorize it? And obviously it's going to be
I mean, it can take you up to 8 years to conduct your research and write it up. That's a long time frame. I think no one really expects from you that you know where each information is located in your thesis. Now, therefore, you are given the time to look up where are things standing, and you can then, based upon the evidence, engage in a discussion with the examiners. So you can point the examiners to pages and figures, and likewise, they can question you on pages and figures. So therefore, a well-annotated thesis allows you to have a good understanding where stands what, and to already think through how is your thesis structured and why is it structured like that. So this is something that can be expected. Having said that, the first point here on the slide applies. Check your institution's policies, whether what I'm telling you is also correct for your institution.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's really good to know, because I've seen a lot of YouTube divas, and prior to the pandemic, they're actually reading from they're actually demonstrating their Viva on a podium, and they're literally, maybe they done a presentation, but they don't actually look through their thesis per se. And so, but it's good to know that you can do this.
I mean, in current times of remote Viva conduction, while that has drawbacks, it also has benefits, right? You will typically be sitting in front of a very big screen. That screen will have a long bezel upside down that is perfectly made for post-its and notes to be sticked on. If it's ideally positioned next to a white wall, you also can extend information there. So you have a huge office space that you can use to your advantage and prepared with all type of information that helps you quicker to navigate through your thesis, which you have in front of you laying, which will allow you to be more fluent in the Viva. I mean, those are all support tools that are at your disposal to make good use of them, I would argue. And now, next to those knowledge-related Viva preparation, you should reread your thesis, make note of any mistakes, and more often than not, we will find mistakes. So it's important for us to understand, why are they there? Is it because I was working hastily? Is it because I did the calculations wrong? In which case, that could have a more profound impact. Therefore, you should look which type of calculations or analytics have gone wrong. So all of this post-submission, but pre-Viva preparation time should be used to look for those type of things. But also the more obvious, think about the wider implications of your work, think about what you will or won't defend. No research is perfect. Draw up a list of possible questions. In the later part of the webinar, we will see some. And practice your answers and ask others to probe and challenge you.
Okay, sorry, I have another question. I apologize if I'm really interrupting you. Once you actually submit your thesis, obviously you've gone through your first supervisor, your second supervisor, and any other source that have gone through your actual work. So when it comes to the Viva, does it mean that perhaps the examiners think differently from the supervisors that have already done, or how does it work in terms of why they would question, let's say, your Viva, or are these general questions that they would ask anyway?
I think both can be expected, but the perhaps more important point was your question or your remark on thinking differently. Yes, that is to be expected. They might have a profound different view than your first or second supervisor, and they might want to challenge you on that, and they might not want to give on easy on just following what your first or supervisor thought. This is science. And either you can defend yourself or you cannot. And defending, not in the sense of this is right, but rather arguing over reasoning, over the analytics, over framing, over scoping your work, over locating it in context, and perhaps most importantly, over the use of related credible literature. If you follow related, credible literature, it will be much more difficult for an examiner to challenge you because you're not defending yourself. You have been building on existing scientific research and making full use of that. So this will put you in a relative secure position because you do not need to argue for your own decisions, but rather why you have been following established research. So I think this is a very important thing. Know about what is the related research, why is it credible, and why was it sensible for you to follow.
Okay, so in that case, is it possible that if your thesis is, very, let's say, well researched, but on the day of your Viva, you don't really demonstrate your study? Is it possible that these two elements will indicate that maybe you will pass or not?
I think it's in that case, perhaps you would get, it might make the difference in between getting out with a minor or getting out with a major and having another Viva. So to demonstrate orally what you weren't able to do in the first Viva. And then if for the second time you're not managing it, well, then the fail would be the consequent result, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, I understand. Thank you.
Welcome. So let's practice your answers. And this is important because it's an oral examination. So you better should be able to articulate your research. And for that, you should practice it. Try to practice, summarize each chapter, categorize the areas of strengths and weaknesses, reflect on the theory, methods, and practical implications, identify the contribution to knowledge, and highlight the actions to be made from the outcomes of the study. What has your study found and why does it matter? It's a what bother pitch that the work should match. Now, there are 4 types of preparations actions that you might want to consider. The first are general preparation, get hold of past theses. In repositories, for example, you can find those. Get hold of past Viva questions and reports. This is perhaps something you can get through the faculty, and find online resources and communities, learn from past experiences. Now, while this sounds all sensible, it is not without danger, because as said, your thesis might have been written over a time frame of 8 years, and quite obviously and hopefully during that 8 years you will have improved your writing skills, your analytical skills. Now, unfortunately, you won't have the time or motivation to rewrite the thesis at the end completely new. This means, therefore, very old parts sit next to very new parts in the thesis, which a skilled examiner will be able to spot immediately. It's quite obvious and clear where is more descriptive writing, where is more analytical writing. Now, for the examiner, it's clear. Is it also clear to you? If yes, make use of past theses because you know what to follow. If not, understand the danger of using past theses and trying to just follow these. Now, specific preparation. Consider the specific content of your thesis. There are a number of methods to help preparing for your Viva. Create 4 to 6 pages roadmap of the thesis, make short notes, and write an alternative index with very short titles. Now, if you have done it already right in the first instance, then your table of content will be specific and will not have names like problem statement, research question, but it will spell out right in the table of contents what each section is about. Now, if you haven't used specific titles, now it's too late. You submitted your thesis. Develop another index with specific titles, which also will allow you to clearly see how each section relates to each other. We have a webinar on mirroring techniques. Take a look at that. There you see exactly how you can assure that there's consistency in the table of contents and chapters. Then there's a faculty level preparation. You can engage in a series of discussions between you and your peers. Contact your supervisors, practice discussing, and see what type of training resources the faculty has available. And finally, there's an experiential preparation, have a dry run, get to people unfamiliar with your work, ideally examiners, those that really conduct vivas, so you get the real experience in a safe environment before it's actually happening. Now, we are offering an advanced training course on the Viva preparation, which comes in 3 formats. You can have access to it free with self-study and peer support. We offer it fully tutored with tutors that we source from universities and that are really conducting vivas on a regular basis. Or we have a on-demand feedback option whenever you need it. Take a look at the course and see if that can provide you with guidance. There are a lot of questions that can be expected in the Viva. And there's also a lot of literature and media material, so for you to better understand what the Viva is about. And we also can organize mock Vivas for you. In this case, there would be exactly the same type of environment with 2 examiners that really usually conduct Vivas and share, and then you can experience yourself how you perform in the Viva and what you might still want to improve.
Just one question, Dr. Andrews, is obviously your first or second supervisor will try to support in terms of your Viva preparation. How does this course you're mentioning differ from this? Because I assume the personnel who in the university are aware of what the Viva consists of. So I'm just trying to understand, is there a gap between the two, or?
Well, I think the danger in between the relationship of you and the supervisor is that after so many years, the supervisor will be entirely colorblind with regards to your work, with regards to you as a person. It's sort of like a marriage where you get over the not so good things and the personal traits of the other because you need to live with it and cope with it. Likewise, the research, if you have to read something that many times and it's always the same, or the discussion always centers around something, you lose the distance. So, for example, yeah, no, you just lose the distance. I think you need to be aware of that, and every supervisor will be aware of that being the case. Yeah. So they can supervise, certainly, but it's in the nature of the relationship. It's a long-term relationship, and you just need to look what happens in any type of long-term relationship, right?
Sure, I totally agree with you. This is a very interesting point. And the other point I wanted to quickly mention was that, you know, there are, you know, the social experience that we have. There are maybe documents which say, you know, here are 200 specific questions that you are likely to get in your Viva. Now, I'm just trying to understand whether you take this literally, that, you know, you won't go beyond the scope of these 200 supposed questions, and this is exactly what you expect from a Viva. And you know, I've also heard from people who have experienced the Viva that you know, you should be aware of certain unexpected things. So I don't know whether there's a scope or, you know, to be prepared for such an event.
I think it's not the number of questions that you will have used to exercise and prepare, but rather how fluent you are in your thesis and research. And based on that, you are or are not prepared for any type of question. And you don't need to be prepared for any type of questions as long as you have a very good justification why you are not prepared for that question. That is equally fine. And we will look now exactly into some things that to expect in the Viva and equally what not to expect. Now, there are usually 4 types of questions in the Viva. What is it about? What did you do? What did you find? And why does that matter? So why bother? Then you might find warm-up questions to calm you down, in particular at the beginning, confirmatory questions to let you demonstrate your knowledge, and they really will be pushing you until the end. That can be expected. So deep confirmatory questions to let you demonstrate that your knowledge is more than skin deep. Then there will be calibration questions to help the examiners check their understanding of your work. Scholarship questions to let you demonstrate that you know the field as well as your own research and how it fits into the wider academic work. Salvaging questions when you have written something badly to let you show that you do know what you're talking about. So exactly, it's important to also know where are mistakes and weaknesses in your thesis, where are outdated parts that actually are from the very beginning still, but I was just not having a single motivation left to rewrite that now. So there will be some parts like that, be aware of that, and also be honest then, yes, reason being I was running out of time, it had to be submitted. If you want me to improve it, yes, I will, right? Pushing the envelope question, yes?
Sorry, Dr. Is it possible that the examiner will say, why didn't you look at this material? You know, because, you know, this particular author is would have perhaps provide you better input to your thesis. Is it possible they would ask you this?
Yes, absolutely. And to that, there would be a number of possible answers. One answer is I didn't knew, which is a very thin answer. Another answer would be no, about this research I haven't come along, but from the title I get, it is about this. And for this, I had come across this and this and this and this and this research, which pointed me not to that author that you mentioned. However, it pointed me to. So you see the different level of fluency that you can develop in your argument. Just saying, yeah, I didn't know is perhaps a poor answer, but it can be turned into a very engaging answer that would be stimulating for the examiner too. So it's on you entirely to drive it in the Viva. Mm-hmm. And you can see, you can turn around that you didn't use something into something great by showing reflection and saying what instead you have been doing. So pushing the envelope questions to see how far your knowledge goes. Now, and this literally speaking can be expected up to that point. And please also understand, experienced researchers and examiners will stop before the breaking point. However, it can be expected that the breaking point might also be crossed. So understand how you behave once you are breaking down. Have you ever experienced such a situation? What has happened? If you have not, what do you think could happen? So this is something to be prepared for, but there also will be, this is neat questions to give the examiner a chance to discuss your interesting ideas, redemptive lessons learned questions to give you the chance to admit some awful blunder in your work so that the examiners can let you off without worrying that you make such claims or actions again. And obviously they give me a reason to pass your question. So if you are preparing for this type of questioning next to the subject-based questions, then you should be fine. What might impress examiners? Well-considered replies. And as we've just seen, you can even turn a I don't know into a well-considered reply that can be stimulating. Flexible and agile thinking backed by argument and or evidence. Exactly that's I don't know is not showing argument or evidence and also not flexible and agility. Good understanding of appropriate research message. Critical awareness of the field of inquiry, clear reason for what is included and excluded. You had to draw a boundary at one point in time. Your research could have taken in any direction. So make sure you know why the boundaries are as they are and what that implies for your research. Self-critical assessment showing honesty in what has been achieved, partly achieved or not achieved at all. This is research, it's perfectly understood that things can and will go wrong. There is no such thing as a perfect research project. So if you don't see that anything has not worked out as you expected, that's not in the benefit of you and certainly not in the survivor. Having said that, you also shouldn't say things didn't work out, therefore it failed. No? It's again, the I don't know is not the right answer and doesn't provide the right level of criticality and reflection. Awareness of what remains to be reached and latest key developments, and exactly responding to the white bother pitch. Now, there are some essentials that might be obvious, but they are not obvious. And what I think is a classical to be seen in the Viva, quickly explain me what your research was about. And there you go. And I could pick up 2 coffees and have my breakfast in the meantime, and you still would quickly talk about and introduce. No, stick to the 2-minute rules, no answer longer than that. 1 answer, 1 sentence, 1 argument at a time. If you have more arguments, use more sentences, each being 2 minutes at a time. Establish double feedback loops. That's not a monologue, it's a dialogue. And close each response with an inquiry. Did this answer your question? Was the concept of X clear to you? I realize that that might be oversimplified. So if you want further information on ABC, then please let me know, right? Again, see that in the context of the 2 minutes rule and 1 answer, 1 sentence, 1 argument at a time. Do not try to bring in everything at once. And do not be opinionated. We all have our opinions and beliefs, but this is science. It's evidence-based. Try to handle it from that perspective. And get yourself out of the mud and resume if you understand you went off the road. Perfectly fine and much, much better than just going down the wrong lane. The examiners will understand you're nervous and they will understand you're damn nervous and it's a new situation for you. So they usually would want to be supportive, but they will not get you out of the mud into which you talked yourself. If you understand you went off, then get yourself out. How can you understand you went off? Double feedback loops. Not only reading and interpreting the behavior of the other, but actively engaging and asking. Now, here we go, the Viva day. The obvious, try to get enough rest the day before, eat, drink, and arrive on time. Fear is natural, try to be positive, get ready to engage in a debate. Try to always provide evidence from the research. As said, commented, see this in front of you, and you know where things are. Be ready to get questions on any part within the research and look forward to a good discussion. It can be very joyful if you are well prepared. So during the Viva, again, there are strengths and weaknesses. It's essential you're prepared for both and to discuss it. It's a job of examiners to find and discuss weakness. It's, as a matter of fact, one of the key ideas, right? It's science, it's research, you present it. Why is it as you say it is? I mean, it's science, so be prepared to discuss weaknesses. And also understand you're not challenged as a person, but you're challenged as a scholar. You're challenged for your thesis and you're expected to defend it. So don't be offended, but just understand this is the nature of the Viva process, looking for weaknesses, understanding and discussing everything. So understand which type of person you are will help you in considering what needs perhaps mitigation in the first instance. If there are questions, yes, please.
That's one question, please. Is it when the actual Viva happens, is it then when the examiners decide that your thesis requires either a minor or a major action in the future, or is it prior to the Viva they have already decided?
I think it will be both. I mean, obviously, once reading the thesis in detail before, you will have already a pretty good understanding of where you located Is it up to the standards? Is it not? So I think the bulk decision perhaps has been taken based on that. And then in the Viva, you can either positively surprise the examiner, therefore comforting that the change requests, that you will be capable to do the change requests that they have, or you can just confirm what they thought on the negative end, which means that you perhaps lack the ability and capability to do any further changes or bring it up to a higher quality level. So yeah, it can work both ways, and the decision will be partly taken in the Viva and partly before.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Ask for clarifications. As said, it's a dialogue, and if you don't understand or you're not sure, then ask. Ask, but right. Keep the dialogue friendly and constructive. So try to ask in a creative way, provide examples of how a question could be interpreted rather than asking, what does that mean? What do you mean with what does that mean? So exactly, be specific. Take time to think before answering. Be prepared to ask questions and enter into a dialogue. Discuss the research within the context of other work. As said earlier, it's crucial for you to know about related research. That's your best friend and defense, because if it's credible research and you can explain well why is it related, that will put examiners at ease, because it shows them you were looking and identifying literature that is of relevance to your work and research. And exactly, you can express opinions, but better do not. And there's a clear and easy way of not opinionate, which is always focus on the research problem rather on your view. If you stick to the research problem, this is third person, by the way, that will prevent you to revert back to first person, so there's no real chance of opinionating. Don't take offense and avoid blaming at all. So you're not expected to have a perfect recall of your thesis, so you can look into it, you can refer to notes, you're even expected to refer to notes. If you don't know things by heart, obviously if for each question you need to look into your thesis, that will look poor. It should be a good balance of knowing the work by heart, and for some details having perhaps to go into or point into a specific page. And if you get lost, resume, and as said, keep double loops up all the time. Now, I've pointed earlier to a training course that we have online. This course will have a lot of specific questions for each of the parts of the chapter. Therefore, I'm not going here now through each of the questions. I will just show you that there are different types of questions depending on which part of the thesis is covered. A thesis has usually the same chapters or the same purposes. It starts with an overview and introduction, followed by a literature review and a methodology section. Which comes first depends on the institution where you take your thesis, but also on what is the related research you have been following. So all of that will have impacted the way you build your thesis. And then there will be a part that looks at the analysis and evaluation of the data that you collected. It will go over the review, what are the strengths and weaknesses of your study, and it will close with some reflections. So those are all areas to which questions will emerge, and you can prepare for that on the subject matter level. So that's a pretty clear way of preparing for the Viva. Now, while at current, your focus is perhaps at the pre-Viva stage and what happens in the Viva, I think once you're through, it is crucially important to also understand that there will be post-Viva impacts. Now, if you get major modifications, well, it's not what you hoped for, but it's still pretty okay. You just go based upon the examination reports that will have specific change requests and do the changes, and then you're done. Having said that, some of the questions might not be linear and might need thinking through the entire thesis and the entire structure of your work. That will require obviously more work, therefore you have been given more time. And we will be offering in 2 weeks and 5 weeks from now exactly 2 webinars that focus on working with Viva feedback, but also addressing major change requests. So we will cover that in a later field. Now, what perhaps is less obvious is that there is a transformative process that was started at the beginning of the doctorate. And this transformative process is not over yet. For once, 63% of students experience, 36% of students experience some level of anxiety and stress through the studies, and this can continue post Viva 2. The point here is, what is next? And where am I now? What has changed in me? I mean, just some very simple things that you perhaps never thought about. Almost any education offer that is available out there is now below the way you potentially could learn. What does that mean? There are 99% of the world population that hold no doctorate. Therefore, they might struggle in following your line of thought. How will that impact my day-to-day communications with others? What is happening on a professional level? Would I want to move into academia, which is extremely difficult? And if I make it, and I might find out it's a very toxic environment and it's a very boring experience to teach undergrads. Now, all of those are things that you still will need to deal with after the Viva. And that can actually take a couple of years before you settled into who you are, what you do with your skills, and where does it take you. It's something that's less often considered, but something you also might want to start thinking about. So to support you in your mental well-being.
I have one question.
Yes.
Dr. Andres, the one thing is that, for example, 30 years ago when I got my bachelor's degree, it was the same situation where universities never kind of prepared you to go into the, into the world to, get your careers and such. Are you suggesting that even after the, getting a DBA is still similar, or you're still relying on the person who has got the DBA to understand their own idea of how to move forward? Or I was a little bit confused. If you go back to the last slide, maybe you can explain a little bit further.
Well, yeah, you could argue that in the context of a DBA, you're already well vested in your work environment, and that therefore not so much will change. But I mean, just look at the third point on your line of thought. You work now evidence-based. Your reasoning is more critical and analytical. You will look for data before acting, or at least that's more likely. You might be more careful in the way you see things. You don't follow blindly other people that say, now let's move, we need to do it like that. Need? What do you mean with need? Could you explain that to me? And already this type of questioning might cause a number of issues in your day-to-day work environment, because you have become a stranger to many of those that are close to you. Have you been prepared for that? No. Has someone explained that to you once you started the doctorate, that once you come out, that would well imply that your critical analytical mindset will disqualify you for the work that you're currently doing, because you're just thinking too much and asking too many questions that are unwanted. You're not following like a lemming as quickly as others do. All of those things. Has there been any discussion at any point in time prior or during your research? Has anyone put on a warning sign that it's not like a computer that you can switch off? Your brain will use what it has been trained to. I mean, all of the dialogue has not been there, right? And now it's too late. You cannot unlearn, right? The damage is done. So how do you deal with that? What does it imply for the future? What does it imply for your behavior? How should you behave or not behave? What should you watch out for? There's a whole lot of questions to think about. Now, as an example, I've been working for Nanotechnology Institute as an organization developer. The human resource department went to a university and sourced courses as a master level style to teach scientists with a PhD. Total waste of time. Now the human resource didn't know better and the scientists were plain bored. I mean, you could have had them teaching at a much different level. However, why did the university provide that training to the scientists at a master level style? Because they haven't had a better style. They hadn't had an advanced training course. So they would have needed to develop everything from scratch again. That's way too expensive. So you offer them something that's actually below their standard. Now, if you know about that, you know you don't need to get this type of education from the future on, but you search in a targeted manner for special advanced learning opportunities at universities, research sites, or whatever. Now, however, they are very, very scarce at this point in time. Why? Because there's only a global group of 1% to whom they could be sold, right? There's not a big market, it's a niche market. So you either go with a offer that is way below you now, or you need to know how to find education from now on. Presumably none of that had been communicated and discussed with you prior to you embarking on a doctorate, right?
But this, yeah, exactly. This is very interesting because in general, people don't understand this level of education and whether it's applicable in an organization. And certainly I'm seeing this in my organization for sure.
And you exactly not even need to advance to have a doctorate to advance on the type you learn in an organization. Now, if you are through, then you can obviously improve the level on how the organization learns based upon your experience, which also on the positive side would help would enable you to better communicate with your colleagues because they understand better the way you think and learn. Now, having said that, that might well backfire because people get scared once understanding where they are and that others understand where they are. So all sorts of things that come in that weren't an issue prior in earlier days. Does it make sense?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Yeah, thanks for sharing this.
All right, with this, we come to the group activity. As said earlier, those that do not like to participate in the group activity, Jack, can you please stop the recording now?
You can also, but yes, did you want it paused or stopped?